G'day. Now in this podcast we're going to take the idea of cost and start moving towards how we get a firm's supply curve, which, as I said before, are based on a firm's cost. And we're going to ask the question, what happens to a firm's costs as they increase their output? So as firms start to produce more, what happens to their cost of production? Or more in particular, what happens to their marginal cost? Now you remember in our last back in demand, one of the things we did was we looked at consumers' marginal utility and how this leads us onto demand. Now remember, marginal utility is the extra benefit or satisfaction gained from consuming one more good or service. So the whole idea of marginal. Now, whereas for consumers we talk about utility or benefit, for firms we're going to talk about marginal cost. And this is what we're looking here is the law of diminishing returns, sometimes also called the law of increasing costs. Now to do this, I want you to imagine a very simple bakery, okay? And it's just somewhere along, you probably know a bakery somewhere which you like to go to. And it's got a door and everything. Now in that bakery, there's an oven. And that oven is used to make bread, okay? So that's our fixed variable or fixed cost of production, fixed resource. It's also got some staff, which are our variable costs, and that's the baker who runs it. Now, to run the bakery, they've got to have that oven, they've got to have a fixed cost, so they're going to face that at all times. But what I want you to think about is as they increase more variable resources to the production process, what's going to happen to the extra output? So let's just go with an example. So if they've got no variable resources, no raw materials, no staff, then obviously their output is zero. Now, with a baker by himself, if he has one person doing it, let's say that he's able to produce 100 loaves per hour. Okay, so that's pretty good going. But obviously, as demand grows, he wants to increase. So he's going to say, I'm going to get a second person to help me. Now again, they've only got one oven, but now we can add a second person. Now the great thing about that is that's going to increase our productivity. So we're going to get our output goes from 100 to 250 loaves per hour. So that means that increase in output has gone up by, output has increased by 150. When we went from 0 to 100, it went up by 100. This time it went up by 150, so that's good. The return that we're getting to adding the variable inputs has actually gone up. Now let's say he adds a third person, and this time output goes up to 500. So that's really making things a lot better. So the question is, what's our marginal output? Our marginal output is now 250. So that person was well worth getting. Now let's say they get a fourth person. Now if you think about it, at some stage you're going to have too many people. They're going to start tripping over each other, they're going to get in their way, so we've already had a third person, now we've got the fourth person, and they're going to start bumping into each other. So yes, output will go up, but this time not as much as when we added the third person. So we've got up to a total output of 700. So our output has gone up by only by 200 this time. And let's just do one more. They add a fifth person, and now our output has gone up to 800. So again, output has increased, but this time by only 100. And what you can see here is after the third person, our returns started to decrease. So at this point up to here, up to 3 people, we had increasing returns. But after that, as we added more variable resources to the fixed factor of production, our extra returns started to decrease. And that's the law of diminishing returns, which states as we add more variable resources to a fixed resource, it will start, output will grow in smaller and smaller amounts. And that's the law of diminishing returns. Now that's also called the law of increasing cost, because If I was to turn this around and keep the increase in output constant, what you'd find is that the cost of production are actually starting to increase. So initially, as we increase output, so if I draw a graph here and we increase output, and we put up here marginal cost, and we put up output over here, initially the marginal cost will go down, but at some point the law of diminishing returns starts to set in, and our marginal cost starts to rise. And so we call that the law, and that's our marginal cost curve, we call that the law of diminishing marginal returns, or the law of increasing costs.